Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to the Niche Cast, coming at you on 30th of January. We are from theniche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sporting matters in depth. I've just published a men's Super Smash All-Stars, which will be followed by the women's Super Smash All-Stars tomorrow. We've got a deep dive into Chris Wood's mahi with Nottingham Forest, which was pretty interesting until I watched some of that Chris Wood game on the weekend, and I'm just assuming Nottingham Forest sucked because they weren't very good. But then you're watching Chris Wood, and there's a few times Chris Wood's quite passive in the box, and I'm going to just chalk it up. It wasn't Chris Wood's best performance, wasn't Nottingham Forest's best performance. But I was like, you've been talking up Chris Wood all this time, and then I watch Chris Wood, and he's a bit timid in the box. So he's not really pushing forward into those chances that I would expect Chris Wood to take. So am I correct in my assumption that was a very underwhelming Nottingham Forest performance, which obviously affected Chris Wood's performance?
Yeah, not the best advertisement for for what he's been doing lately. Not the best example. It was, yeah, I don't know. It was a cup game against a lower tier team, and they just didn't turn in a very good performance. And I think there were flashes from Chris Wood. There was like one or two times where he did the dribbling thing. There was a couple of nice passes out to his winger. Also, a lot of times where he just didn't get the ball and then he's not necessarily a guy who goes hunting for it. I think that's not something to expect from him. But it's yeah, the crosses weren't flying in. They were spending too much of the game in their own half. They'll have to do it again in a week or so in a replay. But last time they had to go to a replay against a lower tier team, and he scored the winner in extra time. So maybe he'll do it again.
So you can read about Chris Wood's form on our website, theniche-case.com. Also got a deep dive into the Blackcaps test squad and some state of the affairs happening around that test series. And of course, we'll have lots more coming up. There's plenty of rugby league stuff there. We're still Teamless Tuesday is today. So stay tuned across all Niche Case platforms for Kiwi NRL junior matters. Don't think we'll be touching on any Kiwi NRL stuff or Warriors stuff in today's podcast. We do have Lydia Ko. We've got some Tall Ferns, Breakers, Blackcaps, Super Smash, Kiwis in the A-League, as well as Wellington Phoenix. We'll take a little break from the rugby league today, but you can keep up to date with all Kiwi NRL Warriors matters, especially on Twitter, tweeting out the team lists and stuff like that. And also, shout out to our newsletter via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com, because yesterday I did a little breakdown of the New Zealand Warriors junior captains across Harold Matthews and SG Ball. And of course, on Friday, I went deep into the juniors coming out of Canterbury Rugby League. Also, special shout out to Danny Verk, because they've got a little hot pocket as well of Kiwi NRL junior talent. So that's the newsletter that comes out every Monday and Friday. We've got the website that goes deep into Kiwi sports. And we also deliver our subscriber podcast later in the week. This week, we're probably aiming for Thursday, which is a bonus podcast for folks on Patreon and those with a paid Substack subscription. And also, I'm putting it up there in the membership section of Buy Me a Coffee as well. So we're seeing how that goes. But this week on our subscriber podcast, we will be previewing Blackcaps versus South Africa, the first test, and we'll probably touch on some flying Kiwis as well. I did see that clip you made of Michaela Moore, and her. As far as passes from centre backs go, that was as good as it gets. So check that out if you're on the social media platforms. Excellent assist for Michaela Moore in the Flying Kiwis department, which we will be discussing more on our subscriber podcast. Big up to everyone supporting us through Patreon, paid Substack subscription, and through Buy Me a Coffee. It all makes a big difference, and we appreciate your support. Keeps us on track, to be honest. Lets us know we're doing some good work, and we will keep doing our best, endeavouring to deliver Aotearoa sporting notes, nuggets, bits and bobs, as we do. Newsletter, yep. Subpod, yep. Patreon, Substack, website, it's all there. Mindfulness, vamos.
Vamos with Carl Gustav Jung, we have forgotten the age-old fact that God speaks chiefly through dreams and visions. Shout out to the unconscious, keeping with Mr. Carl Jung's overriding theories.
Shout out to the unconscious, although I will add that good ideas, bad ideas, angelic ideas, demonic ideas, they all come from the same place. And you've kind of got to sift through them. Like, just because you've had this like brainwave from your unconscious, your subconscious, you're like, whoa, that was like this mad intuitive vision that I had. You've also got to like do a lot of work to process, like, is it actually a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Because I have realized that good ideas, bad ideas, and such like polars. I did touch on this in the newsletter yesterday, the extremes of how people are viewing cricket. It drives me insane. Like one day test cricket's in danger, the next day test cricket's like the best thing ever. And it's very strange how people can move between those extremes. But back to our mindfulness, those extremes are evident in where your thoughts come from, but they all come from the same place. Because you can have nightmares and you can have good dreams, but they all come from the same place. And you need to figure out, you need to do a lot of work to assess the, not where they come from, but it's more like you just need to assess the quality and how helpful those ideas, those thoughts, those visions are, because I guess the bad thoughts, the bad ideas can be disguised as good ideas because they come from the same place where your good ideas come from.
Yeah, and just because you're being spoken to doesn't mean that you have to listen. It's there is, you're right, there is good advice
always
and
got to
there is
listen.
bad advice, or you always got to take it on board. You don't necessarily have to act on it. Yeah, that's true. You do still have to be receptive. And I've been reading a bit from Jung about like dream interpretation stuff lately, which, what's weird is I never remember my dreams unless I wake up like right in the middle of them, and then they're forgotten within 5 minutes. But since I made a point of like, well, I have to try remember them so I can think about them and like apply these ideas, as soon as I did that, I started remembering them more. So weirdly, it now feels like I'm dreaming way more than I was, but it's actually just that I'm recalling them because I made a point of doing it. But yeah, Jung's big thing is like the conscious mind interprets things through like logic, language, cohesive, coherent ideas and whatever. The unconscious mind can't do that, because if it did, it would be the conscious mind. The unconscious mind has to do something different, and that speaks through like symbols. And dreams are the dreams and visions are like the telephone line, connecting one to the other. But the images we see in dreams tend not to be literal things. They're like represented ideas. So that's where it gets frisky, and that's where what you're saying about listen, take on board, train yourself, like get used to what these ideas mean to you. And if you see a symbol of I don't know, what's a bloody symbol, an apple or something, it might not literally just mean that you're hungry. It might be a representation. Like if you're a religious person, it might represent temptation because of Adam and Eve and whatever, or that kind of thing. All this stuff that gets very frisky and very personal, very specific to the individual, which is a nice thing for a psychiatrist to be able to say, hey, is I can't help you. It depends on yourself. Only you can figure these things out. But it's a murky old world, that dream interpretation stuff. But it's also a hell of a fountain of inspiration at the same time too.
Rightio. Lydia Ko, she is playing some good golf at the moment. She finished second at the Drive On Championship. She lost a playoff hole, I think, to Nelly Korda, but she has finished first and second to start this year on the LPGA Tour. So that's obviously a good start for Lydia Ko. And I just want to offer this kind of boiled down. I think you can do a bit of boiling down with your dream interpretation stuff there. Enough said. The Lydia Ko, boiling down some of her performances and stats to start this year, it's quite interesting because it tells the story, I think, for a lot of golfers or people who just play golf. And we know Lydia Ko, she's a wizard closer to the hole. Putting, she's excellent. I think maybe 2022, she was first for putting, second for sand saves. And they're obviously related because sand saves is, can you get in the hole 2 shots from your shot out of the bunker? So if you're really good at putting, you're going to be able to sink that putt coming out of the bunker a lot easier. So they're related, but also Lydia Ko's fantastic chipping onto the green, getting out of the bunker, putting into the hole. Lydia Ko isn't so good off the tee, but there is a correlation between Lydia Ko's success and her driving accuracy. So to start this year, she's got a driving accuracy of 70.5%. And that is higher than her 4 years previously. So 2022, she was excellent. She had a fantastic year, but that was part of a patch last year, 62.6%. 2022, 66%. 2021, 65%. 2020, 66%. So right now, she's awesome. She's got a driving accuracy of 70%. Aside from 2022, when she was excellent with her putting and sand saves, 66% is good. But there was a dip in her driving accuracy. But if you go back further, 2019, 70%, 2018, 69%, 2017, 78%, 2016, 70%, 2015, 75%, 2014, 79%. So when Lydia Ko was dominating, she was above 70% driving accuracy. Now she has returned to 70% driving accuracy. Now, the thing that everyday golfers are going to understand is when Lydia Ko was awesome and dominating and above 70%, she was hovering around 245 meters per drive, mid-40s, 240s. When her driving accuracy percent went down to the 60s, her driving distance was going up to above 250 meters per drive. So she sacrificed accuracy for more distance on her drives. Right now, and the good thing about his hot start to this year is that she's got a driving accuracy of 70.5 and a driving distance average of 251. So after 2 tournaments, I'm boiling it down to Lydia Ko's found a happy medium. She's not going full distance, but so she can maintain her accuracy, but she has found a few extra meters in her average driving distance from the 2014 to 2019 period, where her driving distance was quite low, but her accuracy was really high. Then she went accuracy low, distance high. Now she's somewhere in between. So that's just a little nugget about Lydia Ko's hot start, first and second in her first 2 LPGA Tour events of the year.
So she's brought she's metaphorically brought the consciousness and the subconsciousness into alignment there. She's got the best of both.
Yes. I don't know if we want to continue this. I think this metaphoric realm is a bit of a stretch for the Kiwi sports realms, but I like it. She has bridged the gap between the two worlds, driving accuracy and driving distance, while maintaining her excellence around the green, because she is definitely awesome around the green. And I'll just set that up by saying Lydia Ko, first for putts per greens in regulation, first for scoring average, first for rounds under par, first for birdies, third for putting average, and 7th for sand saves. So a bit of improvement available there, but when you put it all together, Lydia Ko, she's back. She's awesome. She's doing well. Shout out to her. We also had a tall Ferns squad, and by the sounds of it, you've got Charlize Ledger-Walker in that squad, or New Zealand Basketball have got her in that squad, which is good, but she also suffered a knee injury in her latest game of NCAA basketball. I also see, so there's no Penina Davidson. You'd kind of hinted at that previously, but there's still Tara Reid, and I'm not too familiar with a lot of the other names. Taylor Dalton I've heard of, McGoldrick I've heard of. So just break down, you've already talked about Penina Davidson being out of the mix with an injury, so that's all good. Break down Charlize Ledger-Walker and your thoughts there. And then I'm curious about like which youngsters have stepped up to fill that void for the Tall Ferns, who are off to Olympic qualifiers. They face China, France, and Puerto Rico in China, maybe in 2 weeks' time, week and a bit time.
Yeah, not even 2 weeks. Yeah, I'll swing back around to that because the Charlie Fletcher Walker thing has to be the starting point. But just preface by saying I think other sports teams have shown us that getting selected and stepping up are not necessarily the same thing. So we'll see who steps up, but definitely the youth of this team is a massive theme. So we'll come back to that. But Charlie Fletcher Walker was having a fantastic game against, I think it was UCLA, who are like a 2 seed. I don't know if the seeding counts as seeding at this stage of the thing pre-tournament, but they're one of the best teams in the country, and they beat them. So it's one of the best results in Washington State program history, probably. Definitely their best win of the season. And Charlie Fletcher Walker had 15 points at halftime with a couple of assists. She was looking excellent. And then early third quarter, she's running towards the hoop, trying to get a layup. There's a recovering defender who fouls her, but sort of fouls her. The foul wasn't the instance of the injury. She sort of like went to pull up to finish, and her knee just kind of like her right knee buckles under her. I didn't have the details in the email yesterday, but I found the video of it since this morning. So I have seen the incident now, and it was like just one of those ones where her knee's at slight of an angle and it bends in a way that it shouldn't. So the obvious worry is ACL. That would be probably worst case scenario. Best case scenario is maybe just a hyperextension, but I cannot see how she recovers in time to play for the Tall Ferns, even if that's the case, especially with like WNBA draft coming up in April. I don't know if she'll be affected too much by that because I think she's got enough sort of points in the bank there that the teams who will want to draft her know enough about her now that it's not, and players recover from even serious knee injuries. Like there's enough examples of that. A player goes through that, they recover, they're back, whatever. You pick up where you left off. You're drafting the player they were before that. Sweet as. I don't think that'll affect her too much, but obviously it would be a big bummer if she has to miss out on her last national tournament, considering her team's been there 3 years in a row, only ever made it 1 year before she joined, and then has made it 3 years in a row with her. Will be making it a fourth time in a row, almost certainly, but haven't actually won a game in those trips yet. So there was unfinished business. And then, if she misses the qualifiers, good chance she also misses the Olympics themselves, which would be in July if it's a serious injury. If it's something less, she might be able to miss the qualifiers and come back later on. But obviously the squad itself, the Tall Ferns squad, named just too soon after that injury, announced after that injury. So obviously was picked itself before that would have happened. It just there's no mention of it in the press release. They probably had already written it before the injury actually happens. So I'm not sure what they'll do with that, if they'll find a replacement player or something. They do have, I can't remember who it was, but they had there is a player that they're bringing along as a training player, but I looked up her stats and she played like 20 combined minutes in Toihi last year. So I think that's more of like you're a training player as an extension of the coaching staff rather than an extension of the playing staff. But, we'll see. We'll see what they do. Penina Davidson has been their best tournament player for a couple Asian Cups in a row. She's great at finishing around the rim, and she's an excellent rebounder with big size. Charlie Fletcher Walker is like the superstar player of the team who runs the plays. You couldn't come up with two worse players to lose ahead of an Olympic qualifying campaign. Like that's as rough as it gets. They're also without Talia Tupaya, who's been out for a fair bit of time. She's just had a rotten time with injuries for a couple of years, really, but there have been flashes of fitness in between, like at that Asia Cup, although she played through injury for a lot of that Asia Cup as well when she was there. But when she was fit and available, she was sort of establishing herself as the second scorer behind Charlie Fletcher Walker, and she's not available. And then probably the next best creator on the team would have been Crystal Ledger Walker, who's also not going to the Olympic qualifiers for. I don't think she's injured. I think it's more like personal reasons. So I don't know what's doing. But Mother Leanne Walker is part of the coaching staff, so that we can count out. There's at least a family presence still within the squad. It's It's a rough one to look at how they're going to qualify from this situation where they're missing potentially, you know, four of their best players. There's a couple other of their who was it? Kalani Purcell, I think, is coming back from giving birth last year, so she's was picked in the extended squad, but isn't ready to do this kind of thing. So yeah, if it's assuming Charlize Ledger Walker isn't there, which I think is probably the safe bet at this stage. We're looking at Akini Tara-Reid to step up and have a big tournament. She is having a fantastic first WNBL season with Melbourne Boomers, so she's at least in form. She's ready to go. Ezra McGoldrick is someone who's playing WNBL as well. Not so many minutes, but she's popping up here or there, and she can hit a 3-pointer. She had a sort of role-playing presence at the Asia Cup. Taylor Dalton, perhaps, is the sort of energizer player off the bench, is another one. Stella Beck, obviously, is the sturdy veteran, the most experienced player in the squad. There's players who can step up, and like Zoe Richards is back in, but I think a lot of the focus will be on. I will say McKenna Dale is an interesting player to see, because I think McKenna Dale is someone who has potential to do a bit of what Talia Tupaia was doing as the sort of like secondary scorer. It might have to be more than secondary at this point, but she is someone who can put the ball in the hoop. So perhaps she's got some breakout potential. Shan Rabadi as well as someone else, but I think the funkiest part of the squad, other than the injuries, is definitely the young bigs that have been selected. So you got where are we here? Amy West has been called up. She's 24. She's come back. She has played a little bit for the Tall Ferns in the past. She's back from done her university stuff, graduated. She's 6'4". You got Ratoya Tamilo, who went to the Asia Cup, a little bit of a more development type thing. She's only 18 at the moment. She is 6'4" as well. And you've got Lauren Whitaker, who is 6'3" and also 18, but about 7 months younger than Tamilo. So you still got some size there. Like Nina Davidson, when she plays, it sort of feels like there's Tall Ferns with Davidson on the floor, and there's Tall Ferns without Davidson on the floor, and there is a big difference. But they're clearly looking to see, like, okay, we understand we don't have our best rebounder. We're looking at size and potential here with some of these other selections, and it's a funky old squad. And like I said in the email, it just wouldn't be a New Zealand international basketball team without a fair bit of adversity, without a few unavailable key players and all this. And the good thing about the Olympic qualifiers is that they don't have to win them all. They've got France and China, who, like, France are already through as hosts of the Olympics, but they're playing the qualifiers anyway. I don't understand why they do that, but they do. France are really good. They're probably going to thrash us. China are really good. They thrashed us at the Asia Cup and will probably thrash us again here. But Puerto Rico are a little bit closer to our range, and you only actually, like, 3 teams out of 4 go through. France will be one of them automatically, but you only have to win one of these 3 games, most likely, unless you get really unlucky with results elsewhere. One of these 3 games will go through, so it's just that Puerto Rico game, really. If they can spring the upset there, and I think Puerto Rico will be pretty good. I expect they'll have a strong sort of American Puerto Rican presence. A lot of players gone through the college system and stuff like that. Not a team to be underrated, but they are the only winnable game of those 3. And if they do win that game, first Olympic appearance since 2008. If they don't win that game, well, they won't make the Olympics, just as they didn't last time and didn't the time before and didn't the time before that. So still everything to play for. And I think, I'm not ruling it out for the Tall Ferns. I think it's obviously a lot harder for them without a few of these key players, but there's a possibility, and we'll keep following and supporting and seeing how it goes.
We'll check in with that closer to the time. The Breakers had a win over Tasmania Jack Jumpers, and then they went to your part of Australia, Illawarra, home of the Dragons, and they had a loss against the Illawarra Hawks, which means at home against Tasmania, they defeated the Jack Jumpers, who are 3rd, and then they went away and lost to the Hawks, who are 6th. So weird old Breakers, but it does seem like that can be split between home and away. The thing that I have noted, I don't think this is a good sign. I think there are a lot of negative signs about the Breakers. although they do draw you in with a win. They are very good at being like, oh, we won a game, we're back. We're not going anywhere. The ownership's here. We love basketball. We love New Zealand, but we don't love New Zealand basketball players. And I will note the Breakers do play Perth Wildcats in their next game. So that's another New Zealand derby over in Perth. Two things about the Breakers. In recent times, they had a big blowout loss against Sydney. And then I believe against Illawarra, they had some foul issues. And in my basketball pleb mind, I'm like, okay, what are some bad signs about basketball teams? A blowout loss and foul troubles. They just seem like red flags about a basketball team, and we've seen both of them over the past kind of few weeks in a period where the Breakers have, I mean, it's a positive. They've been inconsistent, but that inconsistency at this stage is a positive because it means they are winning a game, then losing a game, as opposed to being consistently bad. But I did note that, just a bit iffy with the fouls. Let me figure this out and actually refer to some details about the Breakers players fouling out. Do you have any?
Well, they gave up 31 fouls in that Illawarra game against 19. Let's see if I can find the free throws. Illawarra shot 22 of 36 free throws. Breakers actually kept steady there because they made 20 of 22. So they shot 14 less free throws, but only got 2 fewer points from the free throws. But yeah.
So you've got 3 starters fouling out with 5 fouls. And then the other 2 starters, they had 4 fouls. And guess what? The team that started against Illawarra didn't have a single player from New Zealand. So that's where we're at with the Breakers. They had a massive blowout loss, which is never a good sign. And then another red flag is that their starting lineup, 3 players had 5 fouls, 2 players had 4 fouls, and we put that on top of the backdrop of them not playing any Kiwis. They don't like Kiwi basketball players, and they had a blowout loss, and they had foul issues, and they're at the bottom of the table. So that's where we're at with the Breakers. I'm not sure if you've got anything to add there.
Well, the other guy who got starter-esque sort of minutes off the bench, like the 6th man, he played 27 minutes off the bench, was Will McDowell-White, who only had 3 fouls, but he was also team worst minus 22 while he was out there. Because the thing is, like, they lost an away game here. They had a good win at home, then they lost away. But it's also like this wasn't just the Wellington Phoenix women losing away by a single goal, scrappy but not quite good enough. This was the Breakers had a big lead in that, I think, late second quarter, early third quarter round. They were well up for most of this game, and like a really significant lead for a decent section of it. I can't see where they say the higher lead. FIBA give you those things on their box scores, but I don't have it here. And they let that lead slowly trickle away as they were fouling, as they were getting players fouled out. And it's like, there was that game the other week where they tried to call a timeout where there wasn't one. And, you know, there's these another situations where definitely another red flag, not knowing the rules.
Respect to the difference in rules and all that stuff. But if you've just had a blowout loss and in the future you're going to have some major foul issues in a game, in between that, you've got a player who doesn't know the rules.
And these things express themselves. Obviously, fouls express themselves late in the game because that's when you've had the time to tally up, right? And it's these bad decisions late on, and I think maybe the worst red flag of all is that there's not one red flag. It's that there's all these different things. Like they're finding different ways to lose these important games where I just keep hearing this from the Aussie punditry, which I'm so zoned out on at this point because it's so in-house and like everything's real positive but positive American. To the point of it's like putting your head it is very American trying to sound, you know, it's just like putting your head in the sand to some extent because I keep hearing even from people whose stuff I generally respect about the Breakers are so talented and no one's going to want to play them in the finals. It's like everyone should want to play them in the finals. This team finds ways to lose whenever they're playing these important games, and occasionally they just get completely blown out. They've had a couple blowout wins as well, but that vast difference between their best performance and worst performance is not the kind of thing that wins you playoff games. Like that's inconsistency defined, and I don't. It's like you said, they lure you in with a win, and then they lose a disappointing one. I've just kind of given up on trying to follow that trail. Like as I said this a while back, like until they put 3 or 4 wins together, I'm not going to pay that much attention. Then they did put 3 or 4 wins together, but then they had a 3-game losing streak with a couple of awful ones, and they just, I they should make the play-in tournament. I don't think they're any better than that. I don't think a team that is this inconsistent can claim to be any better than that. But at this stage, they might not make the play-in tournament either because they've just lost it. That was a huge loss to Illawarra, who go ahead of them on the table now. Like that's another example of just letting your own fate go out of your hands. So I don't know. Like I said, they might make the play-in tournament, but I don't think they're not going back to the finals this year. They're just not nearly good enough. And I think Perth, who are the form team right now, because Melbourne have had a couple stumbles lately. They lost again over the weekend. Perth are absolutely fantastic. They're going to smoke the Breakers. And they're going to smoke the Breakers with their Kiwi players doing way more than the Breakers Kiwi players get to do. Although I will say, admittedly, in the Breakers' favor, Tom Abercrombie looks like a player who's playing his last season. He doesn't quite have the legs that he has had in the past, and they're not leaning on him maybe enough. They should, you could give the dude a few spot shots a bit more, but he's also not necessarily. I would say there's a reason his minutes are dropping. And Leafa is just, he's inconsistent as well. Like he gets chances, but he doesn't necessarily, he misses a few too many shots. He's just got to make a few more of them to command more. And Delaney's been injured. But the guys they've got aren't playing because they're not as good as the guys who are playing ahead of them. But that's also not the point. It's like you didn't sign the better players. At this stage, you had Ty Webster, you had Shaili once upon a time, and now these guys are going out and being amazing for other teams. That's what we're talking about with the Breakers not respecting the Kiwi balls enough.
At this stage, we're just repeating things we say every week, so we'll keep moving. But I have thought, like at one stage, I was like, man, the NBL, it's like Bruin is like the next best basketball league in the world, like. There's major connections with the NBA. Like, they got some good players. Like, it's quite cool. And now it's just like, what's the ickiest thing about the NBL is how American it tries to be.
Yeah.
And this is not like, to be honest, this is something very specific to Australia. Australia wants everything to be American. They want to take the NRL to America. They're all about getting cricket into America. NBL is just basically American light, and it's the whole NBL prerogative is evident in the Breakers, because the Breakers, like a lot of other NBL teams, are very driven towards the NBA and being as American as possible, which to me is very interesting at a time when the best players in the NBA are not American. So why don't you embrace your kind of unique Australian Kiwi vibes, play that up, and be a purely like really tap into your international identity, which they kind of do with some of those next gen stars. But then everything is, I don't know, I kind of wonder at this stage if the purpose of the NBL is not to be Australia's basketball competition, but it is to be the next gen star production line. Because everything is about the next gen stars and not necessarily about delivering the best basketball product you can for Australia and New Zealand. But I don't know, that's way too deep in the mangroves to continue that discussion.
Leave it dangling out there though. It's a valid point. Yeah.
But at the same time, the whole Australian league is trying to be very American, but they love the Kiwi basketball players. So it's a bit of a convoluted situation where they're all trying to be American, but the team from New Zealand doesn't really like the New Zealand basketball players, but the Australian teams do love the New Zealand players while they are playing up to the American side of things as well. We've got a Blackcaps test squad to face South Africa and the tourists, the touring South Africa party. They are currently playing a practice game against the New Zealand 11 down in Lincoln. And my first Blackcaps test squad thought, and I'm going to drop a couple of kind of more hard and fasty thoughts, get your get your feedback, get your ideas on these thoughts, and then we'll go deep into Blackcaps Test cricket for our subscriber podcast, available on Patreon, Substack, and Buy Me a Coffee. South Africa are going to be playing they are playing their warm-up game in Lincoln, which is in the South Island, southwest of Christchurch. And it looks pretty dry there, fair enough, but conditions in Lincoln are going to be pretty different to conditions in Tauranga, Mount Maunganui, Bay Oval. So that is a factor to keep an eye on. We've got the touring party down in Lincoln for their warm-up game, and then they're going to go up to Bay Oval for the first test. And we have discussed this a lot over the course of our existence. Bay Oval, the most spinniest deck in Aotearoa. And that is how Bangladesh defeated the Blackcaps on that ground. England defeated the Blackcaps there last summer. They were playing a specialist spinner in Jack Leach. And I think the two tests for the series, you've also got Seddon Park. I've got Seddon Park as the second spinniest deck in Aotearoa. So the two tests against South Africa will be played in the most spinniest conditions you'll get in Aotearoa, because the other tests are going to be played in the Basin Reserve, which is more of a hard and fast, bouncy, batting-friendly deck. And then Hagley is either hard and fast batting or super seam-friendly. I was going to say super seam-friendly, but I switched it up there, so it sounded a bit weird, but I said super seam-friendly. So there's one factor to watch out for with this test at Bay Oval. The stereotypical Kiwi conditions are least on show here at Bay Oval. And we've seen it numerous Kiwi summers in a row. Think back to when the Blackcaps, they had an epic win over Pakistan. Mitchell Santner was the key dude there. And I'm also curious, in the Gary Stead had a little bit of a chin wag on Crick Info. He's obviously, he sees no reason why Henry Nicholls can't get back into the mix, which is fair enough, because Henry Nicholls, guess what Henry Nicholls just did? Leading run scorer in the Super Smash. But he also said Mitch Santner, in our opinion right now, is the best spinner in New Zealand. And I already had Mitchell Santner as the best spinner in New Zealand. I had him as maybe the fourth best bowler in New Zealand in my Blackcaps bowler rankings, which I delivered on a Substack newsletter a few weeks ago. So I agree. Mitchell Santner is the best spinner in New Zealand, and he's the most skillful spinner. So there is this idea about when the squad was announced, it was kind of delivered. Henry Nicholls, Ajaz Patel, Ish Sodhi dropped from the Blackcaps test squad. The only player who was dropped was Henry Nicholls. Because I think for any spinner to play a test in New Zealand, you got to be able to bat. And you need to be able to add to the team in the field. Mitchell Santner, Glenn Phillips, they are two of the best fielders in New Zealand right now. And they all bat. Rachin Ravindra, he also bats. So you need to be good enough. Like Mitchell Santner's the best spinner in New Zealand. So he's good enough as a spinner in my mind, in Gary Stead's mind, to do the job. And we've seen Glenn Phillips, he's good enough as a spinner to earn selection for a test in Bangladesh. So it's not like you lose anything with those spinners. But to be a spinner to play test cricket in New Zealand, you need to be good at spin bowling and also contribute to the team in other ways. But of course, Blackcaps, plenty of depth on offer, so they're well equipped for those overseas tours. So yeah, I think Nicholls is the only bloke who's dropped, fair enough. I will say, I tried to offer as much balance as possible with Henry Nicholls. I was doing my passionate defense of Henry Nicholls, which was more about me just tapping into my journalistic integrity, being like, okay, this is the case for Henry Nicholls to earn selection for the test series. I need to do the same thing for Rachin Ravindra. Because Rachin Ravindra's been selected, and we need to have balance when thinking about Rachin Ravindra, because everyone's thinking about Rachin Ravindra as a Super Saiyan international batting prodigy, in the same way that everyone thinks of Henry Nicholls as a bit of a mug with the bat. I offered the balance with Henry Nicholls. I'm offering the balance with Rachin Ravindra. He's got no scores over 10 in his last 4 games. He's got, since his 108 against Pakistan, he's got scores of 42, 13, 0, 45, 8, 3, 1, and 2. Interestingly, scores of 3 and 2 in the Super Smash. And like Devon Conway, when I see a Blackcaps batter who is out of form go down a level and not score runs, then I'm like, well, they're out of form. Because their form issues have seeped down a level. And that was evident in Rachin Ravindra batting against Canterbury, batting against Northern Districts. And I think it was actually also evident with Devon Conway, who was bowled by Cole McConchie. Delivery that went straight through in that elimination final. So the announcement suggested that Rachin Ravindra is going to bat in the middle order in place of Henry Nicholls. That's fine. That's all good. He deserves his opportunity. But no one should be expecting Rachin Ravindra to be an automatic run-scoring monster. First, there's a lot in his career to suggest that he's not an automatic run-scoring monster. Whether it's his T20 record, averaging below 20 in both T20 internationals, T20 cricket, whether it's what he did in Test cricket before this return. He hasn't exactly dominated the ODI scene outside of the World Cup. He's out of form right now. So at least, I'm not saying Rachin Ravindra sucks, I'm just offering balance, but at least keep a lid on your expectations about Rachin Ravindra. Hopefully he scores runs. And I did mention Devon Conway's lack of form. Here's his last 3 years of Test batting, his only 3 years of Test batting. 2021, averaging 63. 2022, averaging 49.9, averaging 50. 2023, last year, he's averaging 32.4. And Devon Conway averaging 32 is a lot different to Devon Conway averaging over 50. So like Rachin Ravindra, Devon Conway is not in form right now. Let's check his scores, last 10 games. He's got one score over 30 in his last 10 games, or one score over 40 in his last 10 games. Super Smash, that 23 looked like a bit of a graft. He scored 2 in his other Super Smash game. T20s against Pakistan, scores of 0, 27. Test series in Bangladesh, scores of 12, 22, 11, 2. Devon Conway's also out of form. And if Devon Conway's out of form as probably a test opener in the series, it's going to be very interesting what Tom Latham does. Because Tom Latham, from 2017 to 2019, he averaged over 40 in 3 consecutive years. 2018, averaging 59. 2019, averaging 50. That has changed to averaging less than 40 in 3 of the last 4 years. And 2 of those are early 30s. So 2021, he averaged 32. 2023, last year, he averaged 33. And 3 of the last 4 years, he has not hit a Test century. And that comes after hitting a Test century in his first 6 years of batting, in each of his first 6 years of batting. So he's gone from scoring a Test century in each of his first 6 years of batting to not scoring a Test century in 3 of his last 4 years of Test batting. So you've got some iffy Devon Conway form. I don't think Tom Latham's out of form because he was one of the best batters in the Super Smash. But he's not quite at his world-class opener status that I did have him earlier, basically prior to the pandemic. So it's a 2-pronged issue there. Devon Conway's out of form and Tom Latham's not quite as productive as we would hope he could be. And this is a large reason why I had Tom Latham dropping below, in order, Kane Williamson, Daryl Mitchell, Devon Conway as my best black cap batters in my rankings. One last thing. The Sam Wells influence, it's there. It's there. So last summer, we were still in the Gavin Larson selection cycle. Sam Wells came on board. You did note some minor tweaks, and I don't know, sometimes you throw up some weird stuff. For example, in our subscriber podcast last week, we were previewing the Super Smash elimination finals, and you asked me about Otago, who were not in the elimination finals, and I was like, what are we doing here?
It's just the old journalistic balance again, you know. They're the only team that wasn't represented. So
Yeah, but then you got me thinking about deep Otago matters, and it's like we're doing the winners here.
well, that was you. I just asked for say a nice thing about them. Which you know
But that's the issue. Once again,
yeah,
there's
well,
not a lot of nice things. Sorry, these are my own issues here. I'm projecting my own issues onto you. But the one great thing you've said about cricket, among many others, is the Sam Wells influence. You noted a few changes in language, the Trent Bolt availability. Sam Wells it's not, it doesn't punch you in the face, but there is like a slight tweak in Blackcaps selections, I would say. And he dropped Henry Nicholls and he brought in Rachin Ravindra. He's also selected Will O'Rourke for the second test, and they did make it seem like Will O'Rourke might play in that Gary Stead yarn. He said some things about playing at Seddon Park in the Super Smash. I think Hamilton, this is a quote from Gary Stead, I think Hamilton, what we saw in white ball cricket, there has got a bit more bounce to it in Hamilton, so that might suit Will O'Rourke. I don't think Will O'Rourke will play a test in this series, but I'm open to him playing that second test. So there is that. It does seem like Sam Wells, he's come in, he's selected a few youngsters. It's also a matter of timing, though. Because last summer, under Gavin Larson, we saw Blair Tickner, Scott Kugelheim, Doug Bracewell play. And that is, like, it's easy to say, okay, that's the Larson style. This is the Wells style. But Will O'Rourke, after last summer, he played 2 A series against Australia A. So, like, he was a good domestic seamer last summer with like upside. But in between last summer and this summer, he helped New Zealand A defeat Australia A in 2 series, 2 4-day series. So it is a matter of timing. It's not necessarily like Sam Wells has come in and he's injected a lot of youngsters. I think it's just more of a natural cycle where Will O'Rourke has played more cricket and now he's had those performances, those growth opportunities as well.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And it does feel like there is a little evolution here, but it doesn't. Perhaps the way to put it would be like a bit of a freshening up of Blackcaps selection kind of ideas. But it's definitely not a massive change. It's not a big shakeup. It's not anything dramatic. It's just a little bit of a, I don't know. It's like this. Like you have a nap and then you wake up a little bit refreshed. It just feels like there's slightly clearer head about some things, and it's I like it. It's probably around time for that because you don't want to be waiting a couple more years to get to that stage, and then you're having a bunch of retirements, particularly in the test bowling stocks, which is a certain possibility at some stage. Like you want to overlap those eras, and I think there's a nice little thing because it's not just Ravindra, it's Glenn Phillips as well getting into the test team, and obviously O'Rourke. But yeah, it's a nice little tidy growth period, I suppose, for the Blackcaps test team. There's a few different things you said there that are quite interesting. I think with Conway, I'm reminded that when he started, there was still a disparity between like his first innings scores and his second innings scores. Like he was getting all his hundreds and fifties in first innings and then not so much doing that in the second attempt at bat in test matches. And I don't think that's anything that was like particularly dramatic at the time or anything, but it is maybe an example of why he wasn't going to stay at that level forever. Like there was already evidence from the start that was not a sustainable amount of runs he was scoring. Right now, he's probably under the expectations, even though we've adjusted those expectations. He's still under them at the moment, but he's Devon Conway. He's a tidy player, and he'll have a point to prove playing against South Africa in particular. So that'll be that'll be a curious matchup to see. I think with Actually, you know what was really interesting, and I see if I can find the tab. I did look it up, but what you're saying at the start there about the tour match, looking here at the exactly 2 years ago when Bangladesh came here and won that game at Mount Maunganui. They won the first test at Mount Maunganui. They got fairly well tonked in the second test. New Zealand won by an innings of 117 runs. Tom Latham scored 252 in that game. Best remembered for Ross Taylor taking the last wicket, though. Not only did Bangladesh win a test match at Mount Maunganui, Bay Oval specifically, getting some good efforts out of their spinners in and amongst. Although actually it wasn't all their spinners, was it? It was Eberdot took 6 wickets in the thing, and Sharaful was their top wicket taker in the first innings. So it wasn't specifically the spinners, but perhaps the overall conditions. It's also seam bowlers can bowl it. Bangladesh are better in drier weather, whatever. The point to make is that they played a tour match as well. Because I was thinking when you're saying that, I was remembering Bangladesh had a tour match prior to that, and that was the thing of why they were maybe in a little bit better shape for the first test. Well, that tour match was in Mount Maunganui, not on the same Bay Oval pitch, but on the number 2, which I guess is just outside because there's like the stadium there at Bay Oval, but everything else just feels like an open park. So I guess maybe they just had the rope fences up around or something. I don't know, but they played their tour match in conditions that were as close as you can get, like 100 meters from the wicket they would have been playing on a week later. South Africa are playing their tour match, as you say, in completely contrasting conditions in the South Island against a team that is also, because it's not a New Zealand A team, it's just a New Zealand 11 team. And I guess geography and travel logistics is the main reason for this. Predominantly Otago and Canterbury players in that squad. There's 1 or 2, I think, from Wellington, maybe, or I can't remember, but it's mostly the South Island players playing against Canterbury there and playing against South Africa. Interesting note there. Like, interesting little New Zealand cricket scheduling note there is maybe they learned a lesson from the last time. Let's not make it too easy for the touring team. Like, we'll give them the warm up that they want, but let's not give them a warm up that mimics the test match they're actually going to play. And then the other point on the selection note, I have here in front of me the Blackcaps press release from their website. A couple of spots within there. Just while we're talking about the language of some of these things, when they mention Rachin Ravindra, it says, quote, having been brought into the lineup for Henry Nicholls, he is set to bat in the middle order. Set to bat says set to bat, like he's getting ready to bat. He's putting his gloves on, he's going to play. There's a note at the end of that paragraph that says Will Young providing batting cover. That tells you Will Young is providing batting cover. He's not in the 11. Glenn Phillips, who is in line to play his first test on home soil. In line to play means he's in the 11 as well. And then there's only a 13-player squad, plus Will O'Rourke for the second test. It says here Mitchell Santner, all-rounder Mitchell Santner, not spinner all-rounder or bowler, not spinner or bowler Mitchell Santner, but all-rounder Mitchell Santner. Blah, blah, blah. If selected in the 11, it will be his first test at home since 2020, which suggests they're probably leaning towards. And that's an open-ended one, if selected. That's not saying bowling cover, that's saying if selected, but that more or less telegraphs what their 11 is going to be for the first test match there, with the caveat that they might bring in Santner for one of the seam bowlers if that's, if conditions are a little bit more in that favor. But I suspect from that, it sounds like Ravindra and Phillips will do the spin bowling. Frankly, I think that is fine. I think you can win a test match at home with those two being your spinners if you've got 4 good frontline seamers, which this team does, which says that, what does that say? That suggests an 11 of Latham, Conway, Williamson, probably Mitchell at 4, you reckon?
You could just ask me. I've got it here. I've got your team ready for you.
Yeah, okay. You pick up the baton and take it then.
So you got Tom Latham, Devon Conway, Kane Williamson, Daryl Mitchell, Rachin Ravindra, Tom Blundell, Glenn Phillips, Mitchell Santner, Matt Henry, Kyle Jamieson, Tim Southey. Mitchell Santner needs to play at Bay Oval. That's what he's there for. And he's going to play at Seddon Park. Like, these are his home grounds. He's a Northern Districts cricketer. He's going to be in the team. They're Neil Wagner's home grounds as well, but I don't think Neil Wagner's doing enough to command selection. He had kind of a good spell in the Plunkett Shield in the first stanza, and he was okay in the Super Smash, and he deserves to be in the squad considering his Blackcaps mana. But for the Bay Oval, I'm selecting Phillips, Santner, and the three seamers. And then you can have a bit of Daryl Mitchell, bit of Ravindra. So you've got 7 bowlers there. Like, that's more than enough.
Yeah. Like, it's actually more than enough.
Yeah. And Phillips, right arm off spin. Santner, left arm, not the racist term, but left arm spin. So I think that's just how it is. You can. What was your Santner linguistics there?
If selected.
Yeah, so I think he will be selected.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with it. I'd suggest if selected sounds like he's probably the second choice, but with time to mix and match. I would prefer the 4-seamer option, but I think if you do that, you'd probably still want, I don't know. I think I would prefer the 4-seamers with Santner and then not Ravindra, but they've basically promised Ravindra's going to play. We'll see how that goes. I'm curious as well about the makeup of that 5, 6, 7 aspect, because I think what you said was Ravindra, Blundell, Phillips, which I suspect is what they're leaning on. That's how it was in Bangladesh anyway, but with Ravindra coming in for Nichols. Kind of think it should be the other way around. And I'd put, well, no, I'd go Phillips, Ravindra, Blundell, but I suspect your bit is a bit closer to what the Blackcaps would be thinking. But we'll see how that goes as well.
The beautiful thing about having Phillips, number 7, is he's going to have a whack. And so he's good enough, like if you lose early wickets, he can build a test innings. Like Finn Ellips has a pretty good first-class record, I believe. He averages over 40.
Over 40, definitely, yeah.
Off the top of my head, let's confirm that. Glenn Phillips averages 42 in first-class cricket, 46 in test cricket. Glenn Phillips can craft a test innings, for sure. But when you're thinking of like test cricket X factor, the less responsibility he has down the order to then play his shots, I think is the most beneficial thing to the Blackcaps test team. Because if Glenn Phillips is playing his shots, you can change the course of a test match in a session. And that's the ability of Glenn Phillips. So I think having him number 7 is better suited to that. At this stage, I would view Rachin Ravindra as a pure batter.
Yeah.
Fair play to him, his test opportunities previously came down the order. And this is a dude who opens the batting for Wellington in Plunkett Shield. So he went from opening the batting in Plunkett Shield to batting 7, batting 8 maybe. That's a very different role, and he has performed a variety of roles for New Zealand. But as a pure batter, I think he's better suited to that number 5 slot. And then Phillips can play with his freedom down the order. So that's why I'd have it sorted in that order.
Yeah, and it is all potentially a little bit interchangeable, but not interchangeable. Well, it's interchangeable. I don't expect them to be swapping back and forth. What I mean to say is it doesn't make a huge difference one way or another. If it's not the difference between opening the batting and batting at 5 or something, but it's and I think, I think you've convinced me on that one with Ravindra. I think you need to be picking him as a batter who can bowl, and that selection sort of confidence does mean a lot to a young player of saying like, we've picked you here not to be a bowler who might be able to bat a bit. So like we back your number 1 aspect of your game, which is your ability to score runs. And therefore we're going to put you at 5, which is, very firmly in the middle order. It's a batsman's position. Whereas Phillips is there as a little bit of a like key sort of a
X Factor.
Inspector Gadget, do a little bit of everything. X Factor, yeah, which is you can float that a little bit. We'll just throw out there. Tom Blundell he had an awful tour of Bangladesh with the runs. Everyone struggled to score runs, but like he scored fewer than Henry Nichols, and Henry Nichols got drops. So Blundell more recently has been better, but he might want to score a few runs. Just say that, and there might be a case to batting him at 7 below Phillips, but it's coming in at 4 down or coming in at 5 down doesn't make much difference really.
Yeah, they don't make decisions based on how many runs you're scoring. Like, that's just where you bat. They're not going to drop Blundell down the order because he's out of form, you know?
It's not dropping him far anyway, but it wouldn't be dropping him so much as putting Phillips up. But it just, these are very small details that don't matter that much. Overall impression, I kind of love this squad. Do you feel the same?
Cracker. I love
this is a really good Blackcaps test team.
Like the role Phillips is in for like batting 7, possible spinner. Because again, if you have Phillips and Santner in the same team, your fielding is neck level. Like Phillips glows in the field. Like he is impossible to ignore in the field. We saw that in the Pakistan T20s. And Santner is just as good. Santner, remember the series against Pakistan, he had a run out. He had the slinky run out where he threw the stump down, releasing the ball below his knee. Like, you can say the World Test Championship team was a better team. But like, if you got Phillips and Santner and Kyle Jamieson and Rachin Ravindra and Daryl Mitchell, like these dudes are really fun, entertaining, cool cricketers. Not to mention, if Devon Conway catches fire, that's an entertaining innings. Kane Williamson, the GOAT, he's the man. Tom Latham, gritty as anything else.
Daryl Mitchell batting at 4.
Yeah, this is a really fun group. It will be very interesting to see what happens with Neil Wagner, but we'll see. We'll dive into that more for our subscriber podcast because we do have some Super Smash to touch on. Auckland men won the men's Super Smash final. Only like maybe a third of the game was played there before rain washed it away. Wellington won the women's final. Just a quick note about Wellington. Well, shout out Rosemary Meir, 4 wickets. That was an epic spell of bowling. I'd like to see Rosemary Meir in the White Ferns squad. I think she's good enough to get a return call. I think Rosemary Meir is a better bowler than Molly Penfold. And I wrote this in the newsletter yesterday. Molly Penfold's promotion for the White Ferns came at the expense of Rosemary Meir. But Rosemary Meir is dominating domestic cricket, and that's one thing Molly Penfold has never actually done. So... And they keep saying how fast she's bowling. She's got a bit of zip. So, and she's just a natural cricketer. She gets nibble. She, bowls with good pace. She's an athlete. So I like Rosemary Meir. I think she should be in any White Fern squad, ODI, T20 moving forward. Wellington continue their Super Smash dynasty, and Sophie Devine, she played 2 games this time around. Not only did she play 2 games, she didn't score many runs, and she literally almost gave the championship to Central Districts. She was bowling the final over. She bowled 2 wides. She fumbled a run out. She dropped a catch, and then I think she took a wicket. It was 2 run-outs with the final deliveries. So she She would have come back for 2 games and then almost lost them the final. It's harsh to say about Sophie Devine, but it literally happened. And it would have been bonkers. But then, of course, Sophie Devine, being who she is, she somehow found a way to make sure that Wellington won that final. But, of course, it's the Amelia Kerr show. She was dominant, leading run scorer, leading bowler. Fantastic season for Amelia Kerr. I also wrote this in the newsletter yesterday. Like Zara Jetley, she's got a couple of Super Smash championships as a young spinner, and we think like she's not even in the White Ferns mixer. She's got a slightly better T20 record than Eden Carson with multiple Super Smash championships, but Eden Carson's the White Fern. Fran Jonas is the White Fern. So don't sleep on Zara Jetley. Like she contributes to a dynasty of Super Smash cricket. Of course, Georgia Plummer, excellent season for her. Lee Kasprick was fantastic with the ball. Jess Kerr, one of the best, if not the best slugger with the bat, also very good with the ball. I still think Jess McFadden's the best wicketkeeper in women's cricket, but she hasn't like demanded that top spot. Few mishaps with the gloves, but also not many runs. So it's still this kind of hole in women's cricket where there's no wicketkeeper saying like, I'm the one. I am the one wicketkeeper who is going to lead the White Ferns with the gloves moving forward. Bezodenhout, she's often out injured or with battling illness. I don't think Izzy Gaze is that good. Jess McFadden hasn't really like elevated to command selection ahead of Izzy Gaze. I think Holly Top's real good for Northern Districts, but she's probably a bit young. Polly Ingalls is pretty good, but she's not doing enough to demand selection. Natalie Dodd is solid, good domestic wicketkeeper batter. Probably not White Ferns level, but I'll be happy. Like she's better than Izzy Gaze, so I know she could be there. But yeah, so as Wellington Blaze continue their dynasty, they're awesome, they're fantastic, and just love watching the Wellington Blaze play cricket. Also, shout out Natasha Kaidaya. She had a good knockdown the order, 12 runs off 4 deliveries, good outswing bowling. She only took 1 wicket, which meant she had an average over 100 in the Super Smash, but she's a good bowler. And I was also interested to see Kate Chandler earn selection in the first 11 for the final. She had a tricky batting innings. She kept missing the ball, which, you know, it's going to limit your scoring if you can't hit the ball, but she is a really good cricketer who didn't quite show her best mahi in that final, but she's really good. Going back to the men's side, the final, not a lot happened. Tommy Latham scored runs because he's one of my Super Smash All-Stars. But go back to the Friday game, that elimination final between Wellington and Canterbury at Seddon Park, because a whole lot of cool stuff happened there. Michael Bracewell went psycho, 54 runs, strike rate of 225. I had Michael Bracewell and Doug Bracewell in my Super Smash All-Stars. You'll be intrigued about that Michael Bracewell knock because he goes hard. He's a first 11 T20 cricketer for sure. And then you go to Canterbury. Well, obviously, Logan van Beek, the Dutch freak, couple of great catches. He's awesome. And then you go like, well, Zach Folks, Canterbury's best player, 3 wickets, RPO of 7.7, and he hits the winning runs. 3 runs to win. He hits a 6. Matt Henry hit a couple of 6s. But the Canterbury stuff here, it's about Zach Folks, it's about Mitch Hay. Because Mitch Hay, this season I've seen him play like a scoop lap shot for 6. And I've also seen him play like I guess I don't know what you call it, if it's the same shot, but it's over the slips. So it's like a scoop on the
like
offside.
a reverse scoop, kind of.
Yeah. Like he's literally played scoops 4-6 either side, as well as just smashing balls over cow corner as every other cricketer can do. So Mitch Hay, like he's really impressing me this summer. Always say it, he's got a first-class batting average over 40, and he's got a fantastic T20 strike rate. Let me be specific. He has a T20 strike rate of 148, which is pretty damn high for a young fella. I couldn't have Mitch Hay and Dane Cleaver in my Super Smash All-Stars, though. Dane Cleaver, I think he was 3rd for runs, so he got the selection there. But Mitch Hayes' strike rate is another sign that he is the best young wicketkeeper in Aotearoa, I believe. And then, of course, Zach Fox, Canterbury's best bowler. Overall strike rate, I think, of 150 in the Super Smash. Rachin Ravindra's out of form. So what do you want when you're out of form? Zach Fox angling the delivery into you as a lefty, nipping it away from you, off stump, see you later. Like, Zach Fox, as a bowler, he can move the ball both ways in the air. And then he's got the best execution of the out the back of the hand slower ball. So at this stage, Zach Fox is one of the few bowlers in domestic cricket who can move the ball both ways, and he's got the best slower balls. And he's a really good batter. Like, there's obviously, rightly so, a lot of Will O'Rourke buzz, but I don't think Zach Fox and Mitch Hay are that far behind Will O'Rourke as just pure cricketing prospects.
Yeah, I thought Canterbury made a bit of a mistake in that elimination game and not chucking the last over. They gave it to Matt Henry when Will O'Rourke still had one left, and I think they'd bowled out Zach Fox just before, which didn't seem like Matt Henry is a great bowler, including in T20 is his weakest format, but he, at this level, Super Smash, he can do a job, more than do a job. He's excellent, but not necessarily the 20th over type guy. When you got Will O'Rourke, who I've already said I got good feelings about his death bowling, and Zach Fox cleaning out Ravindra and some of that stuff. And then Matt Henry gets smashed for 23 off that over, and it looks like going into the latter stages that might be a killer.
I will just
until
quickly
he flips it around with the bat.
I will quickly say there's only one bloke who's hitting those sixes though.
Michael Bracewell,
like, he's hitting sixes that other players cannot hit. Like Glenn Phillips, you can throw any New Zealand slugger at me right here, and I'm saying Michael Bracewell is the only player who could hit some of those sixes. Low full toss, high full toss, short ball, on pace, off pace, he's smashing it for six.
Unreal strength, that dude. And just his ability to just lever the ball up and over, and he's brilliant. And there was a beautiful return to not quite return to form because they've been scoring some runs, but it was a nice sort of match winning type thing. And then obviously Matt Henry slugged some sixes to make up for the ones that he gave up, and Logan Van Beek's last over went for just as many runs as Matt Henry's did. And that was a fantastic game of Super Smash, which wasn't the final, but feels like the final because the final got washed out. Although the women's game wasn't far behind, and they did at least get a good finish in the final. So good stuff, good season, good stuff, good cricket.
Good cricket. Let's round the corner into our football section. We got a bit of Wellington Phoenix, winning Wellington Phoenix weekend. The blokes had a good win. They snuffed out the niggly Newcastle Jets challenge, and the Wellington Phoenix men are top of the table, as they are every week at the moment. 8 wins, 4 draws, 2 losses. Next best team, Melbourne Victory, they've only got 6 wins, so bugger them. Mariners and Wanderers, they've got 7 wins, so credit to them. The women, they had a win over Canberra United, which propels Canberra United to last in the A-League. Wellington Phoenix women go up to 7th. They are 6 wins, 1 draw, and 7 losses. As we know, many of those wins in Aotearoa, many of those losses in Australia. I was reminded how awesome Porirua Park is. I imagine they can get, Wellington Phoenix men, they can draw a bigger crowd at the Cake Tin. So you probably, no matter the fact that you've got to shut down half the stadium, you can still probably get more people into that stadium than you would for Porirua Park. But as far as building an atmosphere, generating a vibe, bit of mana for the Phoenix, I was tempted Porirua Pa. Sounds like a pretty cool one, but might need to put that on the hoist and come up with a better kind of fortress name, because it does feel like a fortress down in Porirua. But I kind of might want to see the men play there as well, like maybe a double header at Porirua Park. That would be bonkers, I would suggest. You can maybe weave between the Wellington Phoenix and some of the Australians in the A-League, because you did say that you want to talk about the Australians, or sorry, the Kiwis in the A-League. Who cares about the Aussies? We don't care about the Aussies. And I do think the Canberra United team, who lost to the Wellington Phoenix women, they've got a couple Kiwis in there. Am I correct?
Yep, Devon Jackson was a relatively prominent part. She's really like sort of she started off the season playing off the bench here or there, getting bigger and bigger minutes. It's just like progress on top of progress on top of progress. And now she's just a regular starter for them. She had a goal disallowed at one point, I think, in that game. And then Ruby Nathan also played off the bench, which is more in line with what she's been doing this season as well. So it's good solid step ups there from a couple of players who dominated the National League in 2022. So you do that in 2022, 2023, you're playing A-League football. That's the new pathway. But yeah, they've been going all right for a team that admittedly has not been going so all right. Where are we? We're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 different Kiwis have played women's A-League for Aussie clubs this season, plus Georgia Candy has been an injury replacement lately. 2 of those players have since left. So there's 9 current Kiwis at Aussie teams because where are we? Millie Clegg obviously has left Western Sydney to go play for Racing Louisville, and Rebecca Burrows sneakily left Newcastle Jets in order to play for a team in the Chinese Super League. So there you go. Men's side, Dane Ingham, Newcastle Jets. He played against the Phoenix on the weekend. He was one of the Jets' better players. He's been he had a real breakout season last year. They named him Player of the Season for the Jets, which was wild because he was a fullback for a team that conceded one of the highest rates per game, and then moved to play as more of an attacking player and had no goals and 1 assist. And apparently that's good enough for Player of the Season for Newcastle Jets last year. But that does disguise what was like definitely his best season, his most prominent. He's getting regular starts, and he's built off that this season. He's continuing to look pretty solid. He's swinging in really nice crosses. He does have a couple of assists this season as well. Played as more as a defender against the Phoenix on the weekend. You also got Storm Rue at Central Coast Mariners, who are maybe the form team in the A-League. I mean, it's a sneaky one to say when the Phoenix is sitting top and keep answering every step up that comes across them. They keep having a response to that. But Central Coast, as defending champs, lost their first 4 games. And can't remember what they did on the weekend, but I think they won again, which means I think that's 10 games undefeated since then. So they're on a big streak of like resurgent form. And Storm Rue was a big part of that until he got sent off a couple of weeks ago. So he's currently out suspended. Ollie Sale got recalled by Perth Glory. The other guy who was starting instead of him after Sale got dropped after just 2 weeks, the other guy comes in, keeps a clean sheet in his first game, doesn't keep another clean sheet for like 2 months after that, and then has a spell where they concede 10 goals in 3 games. And now Ollie Sale's back in, made the last 2 starts. However, at the same time, Clayton Lewis seems to have dropped to the bench for MacArthur. So that's I'm writing an article on this. I'll go like more detail on all this, but that's the breeze through of how those Kiwis in the A-League. Obviously, there's a couple of young guys as well that might get a mention that aren't really regulars. As to the women's things more specifically, Rebecca Stott and Hannah Wilkinson at Melbourne City lost again on the weekend. A little bit of a bumpy form for them, but they are still the clear top team, best team. And those Stott's captain, Wilkinson, I think did score on the weekend, or was it last week? But she's chipping away. You know, they're starting every game. Liz Anton, Grace Jale, they're playing every game for Perth. But Perth started badly. No, started quite well, and then have wobbled a bit more recently as well. And feels like that's coincided with Jale being asked to play more as a winger and less of a striker. Although Liz Anton is doing nice things, really starting to make the left back spot her own there, having had a couple of years playing centre back for them. Burrows is left, Clegg's left, Hannah Blake and Rosetta Taylor. Rosetta Taylor doesn't really play for Adelaide at the moment, but Hannah Blake does. And Adelaide did have a win on the weekend, so they're off bottom. But Adelaide have struggled, and that's part of why Blake had such a brilliant first game of the season and hasn't quite been able to carry that on because the team's not very good. Mentioned Nathan and Jackson, and Georgia Candy's an injury replacement goalie for Melbourne Victory. So there's your breeze through of the Kiwis at Aussie A-League clubs. Pretty good stocks this year. Like if there's players who aren't playing as much as they would like, but in terms of numbers, definitely a record for women playing there. Not a record for men, but there's a few guys spread out at a couple of those clubs doing nice things. Most of them fullbacks.
We are from Aotearoa, we do breed a we love a football defender in Aotearoa.
We do. That and goalkeepers.
Yeah, no shortage of goalkeepers, which we are discussing most weeks on our Flying Kiwi section in the subscriber podcast. I did love that Oscar Zavada clip. I am the best striker in the league. That was pretty epic, and if he says it and then he scores a goal, I'd double down on him being the best striker in the league. And that is relevant because my question to you after Wellington Phoenix grabbed 2 wins, because on the men's side you can say like the answer will be Oscar Zavada. He's back in the team, he scores goal. On the women's side you'll say they're back at home. When they're at home they win. My question is like, what did the Wellington Phoenix teams do well this weekend? They both had wins. So in wins, what do they do well? What are some signature elements of when they are winning? They do these things or they do this thing well, which was most evident in their displays over the weekend. Again, don't say Zavada. He's the best striker in the league. He made his comeback. Cool. I want an alternative answer there, and I want an alternative answer to the Wellington Phoenix, they were playing at home. The women were playing at home, sorry. Because I can see how all Wellington Phoenix matters can be simplified to those elements. The men have Zavada in their team. They're going to score goals. They're probably going to win games. The women are back in New Zealand playing at Porirua Park. They're probably going to win. That's just what happens. But as far as like tactics, playing style, key performers, what did the Wellington Phoenix men and women do well over the weekend?
Well, to be fair, Oscar Zavada did say the best striker in the league quote. That was before he got injured, so that was before Costa Barbarosas had his big resurgence, right? So he said that before Costa came out and scored 6 goals in this and had an assist in the space of 4 games and whatever it was. So maybe he might want to as first equal. I don't know, unless you just want to classify Costa now as a winger more so when Zavada's available. So you can get picky with that if you want, but I don't disagree with him. I certainly don't. Sneaky Ben Old assist on that one as well. I want to make mention of that because I'm starting to see Ben Old and a little bit of Oscar Van Hattem as well. Actually, these 2 guys who have Old more so, but had a few opportunities, been around the team for a couple years. And if there was one criticism of Old, there's probably a couple more criticisms of Van Hattem for just being a little bit less involved, but he was also getting fewer minutes. He's getting more involved. He's doing some things when he's out there. Ben Old is getting big opportunities and doing fantastic things when he's out there. Just that final contribution is the key thing. It's one thing to look good. It's another thing to produce, get that production, the goals, the assists. Ben Old is in particular starting to do that, although I think Van Hattem's got a couple of assists as well. So shout out to a couple of them youngsters who are stepping up. When you consider this as a team whose attacking group was weakened from, the whole squad across the thing was weakened from last year to this year, and they needed those academy players to step up and do big things. Obviously, Paulson, Sermon, Lucas Kelly-Hill goes without saying the strides they've made this season and how important they've been towards what the team's doing. But Ben Old as well in particular now is looking fantastic. He's just also, beyond all these other things I could say about him, he's just fun to watch. Like, he's just one of those players who you're like, oh, Ben Old's playing. I'm gonna sit up and pay attention whenever the ball's at his feet. he just does stuff. He's such a good dribbler, and he's got great close control, and he's starting to thread these passes and pop up in the penalty area and stuff as well. It's great. It's good fun. Specifically to the question, I think there is one thing that links both the women and the men's performances this week together in a way that also might tell you a bit about what they've been doing before that, because I think it's been consistent for the men, and that's why they're top of the table. I don't think it's quite been as consistent for the women, more specifically in those away games, which is probably why they're losing those away games 1-0, 2-1 every time, is just the defensive grit that you saw from both of them. And in different ways, because the Phoenix men, they switched formations. They started with the back three. They haven't done that this season. They've finished with the back three a few times, I'm pretty sure. Certainly, it was something they used to do a lot under Ufuk Talay, is sub on an extra defender and sit back when you're holding on to a lead, just for the last, 10, 20 minutes, or perhaps when you're, depending on the matchup. They'd played Newcastle Jets once before the season, and it was at home, and they lost 3-0. And they actually played quite well in the attacking areas, but they missed a few chances. But it's the way in which they gave up chances defensively, and then how that flipped things around and defined the game. They clearly had a plan. They switched things up to that back three. You also had Nico Pennington playing at wing back on the right, filling in for Tim Payne, who was obviously suspended. And it was just like, I thought Scott Wooden had his best game of the season in that one. And there's some decent challenges for that title as well from some of his performances. And just the way in which they do this every week, the Knicks blokes, they absorb pressure. But when I say they absorb pressure, I don't mean that in a cliche, they're just under pressure. I mean, no, they literally absorb it. It's like a sponge picks up the water and the water's not there anymore. It's in the sponge. Like, they absorb the pressure. And they sit there defending their penalty area for large stretches sometimes, as we've seen in the last 2 weeks. They did it against Melbourne Victory. They did it against Newcastle Jets here, where it's not a great matchup for them. They're getting stretched. They're having to double up in those wide areas. But they sit there defending the penalty area and don't actually, you realize after a while, like, you're sitting there watching this stuff, being stressed and like, it would be nice if we're up the other end and commanding things a bit more. But obviously football doesn't work like that. You got to have these periods where you need to be able to show the steel. And then at the end of it, you stop and think, well, how many chances did the other team actually have? And let alone chances, like how many good chances, how many clear, like how many great saves did Alex Paulson have to make this week, kind of thing. And that's a higher bar than it is for most goalkeepers, because he makes great saves a lot more comfortably than other goalkeepers. But they have this way of, like absorbing the pressure, but without, they bend, but they don't break. Like they can just stop the other team from being able to create the chances they should be creating for the territory that they have. Do you want to say something?
I'm tapping into my okay, what is good death bowling bit from before.
Okay.
So when you say absorb pressure, what does that actually look like on the football field? Because when I watch the Wellington Phoenix men play, well, actually, to be honest, it starts with the goalies. And I think I'm still doubling down on Brianna Edwards being a really good goalie, better than, well, it was actually, wait, let me get Riley Foster.
Yeah.
She is the American?
Canadian.
The Canadian.
North American.
Who's the other Riley? Is there another Riley, another Foster in the goalkeeping?
Well, there's Michaela Foster, left back.
But so is it Riley Foster, then Brianna Edwards? There's a goalie who's out injured, right?
No. That's number one and number two. They also have Amy Daniele, who's the academy keeper, who's like their third choice, but that's not really in the same picture.
Brianna Edwards, she's better than Riley Foster. I'm doubling down on that. Brianna Edwards is awesome. She's the best Phoenix goalie there is in the women's side. We know all about Alex Paulson, right? Like, he is an absolute beast. So when we're saying, because I imagine, sorry for interrupting, but I imagine that you're saying the women also absorb pressure really well in a gritty defense. Well, they have a good goalie. Like, the men have a good goalie. So that's a fact, they're having a good goalie. But when I watch the Wellington Phoenix men play and hear you talking about absorbing pressure, there's always bodies around the ball. There's always bodies in front of the ball. So even if you do get a shot off, the Phoenix block shots must be through the roof, I'd imagine.
I suspect so, yeah.
And it's like you can kind of see the similarities when you're like, okay, Scott Wooden's awesome, but then Rebecca Lake's awesome, Mackenzie Barry's awesome. Like there's these center defenders who are either always around the ball or always between the ball and the goal, which is, to me, that's one thing about absorbing pressure. Are there any other kind of just like football things that you can imagine in your mind when you're saying absorbing pressure?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good clarification. I think generally the most simplistic way to say it is that the pressure just comes from territory, probably. It's like the areas where you're in a position where the other team could shoot if they wanted, like within shooting range kind of thing. And just the moments in which you're actively being in defensive mode. And that, generally I'd say that just comes from the other team having the ball in a sort of within shooting range, and how that's sort of combated, how that's the absorption process of the matter is, block shots, keeper making saves, attacking players getting back behind the ball in order to crowd things out. It's maintaining your shape. It's winning headers when the ball is crossed into the penalty areas, having a goalkeeper who can come out and punch the ball, and both those teams do. And Brianna Edwards, I think everyone remembers the penalty save. She comes on, saves the penalty straight away. Good week for the Edwards over Foster argument when Foster, admittedly a dodgy red card, but like there's a reason also they didn't overturn the suspension. She does stick her elbow into her. It's not a hard elbow. It shouldn't really have been anything other than a telling off, but it wasn't going to be overturned. To clarify my position on that, I think Riley Foster gives a lot of like sort of leadership aspects, professional experience. I think she's a more tidy all-round goalkeeper, but she's also like 5 years older, and that you expect that. And I love how they did that, where Edwards was the starting goalkeeper last year. She's pretty good, but they're not like, okay, you were pretty good, we're going to stick with that. They're like, no, we're going to bring in someone even better and challenge you even more. And I think she's been a better goalkeeper this year than she was last year as well for that experience. And I think Foster's the number one, but I also, when she's not been available in a couple games before and won't be available next game, I have no issues when Bree Edwards steps up and takes over. Like, it's not a thing I worry about. I did worry about what it would look like when Mackenzie Barry wasn't available this week, but that didn't seem to matter either. Chana Yaber, I think Piney was calling her on the thing. The Australian player that they've picked up mid-season, came in, did a solid job. I thought Rebecca Lake, fantastic. Again, she's been brilliant for the last sort of month in particular, but since she's taken over for Marissa Vandermeer. And same thing, like they were doing the things the blokes have been doing for a few weeks. It's like keeper makes a few good saves, comes out and punches the ball. Edwards did that really well, a couple in particular, including one straight after the penalty, I think. Like they made couple defensive subs. I think they did slip into a back five as well, so there was a crossover with that. But there was a steeliness, a kind of a sponginess to keep the absorption idea going on. There's a sponginess to the Phoenix women's defense, which I don't think was quite there for 90 full minutes in those away games. And there's one of those little things that hasn't quite. But then you also see the way in which their attack built in confidence when they started to get a few passing moves going in the first half. I think Macy Fraser and I can't remember who the other one was, but there was like a specific move where I felt like it feels like something clicked there. It feels like there was a bit of the smiles were coming back, and they're realizing they can work a few things, and they got a couple goals, but it's the way they defended with 10 women in the last 20 odd minutes that really defined how that game should be remembered. And it was the same thing that the Phoenix Blokes did for a while, although they did actually concede a goal at one point, but then Savada scores straight away afterwards. And it's that, that's the pattern that we've seen from the men quite a lot. It's a pattern that we've only seen in stages and flashes from the women, but we got a big extended example of that on the weekend, despite the fact that Paul Temple as well, with like 5 minutes of stoppage time, I think, to go. I think it was a stoppage time subs. chucks on Ellen McMillan, chucks on Daisy Brazendale, two academy, admittedly defensive-minded players, but from the academy debutantes. Just chuck a couple debutantes on while we're hanging on for this lead. No dramas, then they get the job done, same as everyone else does.
I think it's more notable for the women to have that defensive grit. Obviously, the home away, the losses is all a factor, but also if you've got defensive grit while you also have Zoe McMeekin going everywhere,
Yeah.
it's pretty difficult to, really execute your defensive system, your efforts, your mana with Zoe McMeekin popping up everywhere, bursting forward as she does. Whereas the Wellington Phoenix men, I can understand how it's easier for them to be more organized defensively when they don't necessarily have a player like Zoe McMeekin. I don't like, what position did she start in for the game against Canberra?
Left back, but you'll also see her at right wing on the exact opposite part of the field.
Like the Wellington Phoenix men, Costa's going to burst forward. Zavada's a out-and-out striker. Ben Old's going to be bursting forward to set up chances. But, they kind of stay in their little silo, their little bubble.
You're not going to see Lucas Kelly-Heald swapping places with Oscar Zavada at any point.
That's literally the comparison. Like, because they're both tall, they're both athletic left backs. One of them stays at left back, the other goes everywhere. So that's a difference in their defensive systems. So that's how the women are doing it, and that's an impressive element of the women's team defensive grit is they have that defensive grit, and they also have some of the funkiest attacking talents we've seen in Macy Fraser, Zoe McMeekin, and so on. The men, the way you're describing that absorbing pressure, because I'm building this image in my head, and I've just got like Phoenix, 11 men behind the ball, opposition's got the ball basically in the Phoenix third, and nothing happens.
Yeah.
It's just like Phoenix win the ball eventually.
And what was a theme that we talked about the Phoenix from the start, which I don't think we've seen as much in the last few weeks, but a theme certainly through the beginning of the season, and which will continue to be so for the rest of the season. They're counterattacking, right? So you sit all these players behind the ball, you win the ball, you spring into attack. That's not just like you're in defensive mode, but they can transition between those quite quickly. It's not like saying we're in defensive mode and we're staying in defensive mode, the bus is parked and we throw away the keys. That can be a platform for them launching into attack as well, as they've done quite well this season.
Yeah, but then I'm thinking, okay, this Warriors comparison that we've been building out over the past kind of 6 months, what are my visions of Warriors last season in a season where they were really good defensively? Well, it's just a lot of effort kind of deep in your own territory with Shans Nickel-Crockstar making try-saving tackles all across the try line. It's blokes chasing from the middle to make a tackle on the sideline on your try line, because it's the same thing. Absorbing pressure in rugby league, can you defend your try line? Can you defend plays in your 20-meter zone? That is absorbing pressure, because you can kind of let the opposition build up a head of steam, get down the other end, and then their attack fizzles out because there's no... because the defensive team, that's their focus, is defending the 20-meter zone. I think it's the same thing with the Wellington Phoenix. They do a great job of defending their third through, and it's the same thing, like block shots, try-saving tackles, winning headers, slowing the play the ball down. Like, these are little details that help you defend in your own territory. And again, like the Warriors, they've got the right players in a good attacking system, which is what you're saying about the Phoenix. They do have that counter-attacking style, but they've got Rufer to get the ball into those stronger counter-attacking places. They've got Ben Old. It's interesting when you think, because like the Warriors, they've got, it starts with Wade Egan around dummy half. He's the right man for that job. And then you've got passing forwards. They're the right man for that role in the shape. Then you've got Sean Johnson. He's the right man for the next level of the attacking shape. You go to the Phoenix, you've got Alex Rufer as the fulcrum, and then you've got someone like Ben Old who can receive the ball, make a run, and make another pass. And then you've got Zavada, Costa Barbarouses, who are the perfect blokes to be receiving the pass from Ben Old. These comparisons, they go pretty deep. I'm getting pretty hectic.
They do, eh? And I think we'll see more of that now that Zavada's back because while he's not as quick, he's still a pretty mobile center forward, but he's really good at holding the ball up and doing some Chris Wood things. We've actually seen a lot of this from Chris Wood because Nottingham Forest have been a lot more of a counter-attacking team. Well, they were trying to be a counter-attacking team under Steve Cooper. They're a better counter-attacking team under Nuno Espirito Santo, I'll say. And part of that is Chris Wood not being afraid to turn and dribble the ball himself, which he'd never do. Even if there's no one on him, he'd hold the ball up, lay it off before, because that's the kind of thing that that type of striker gets told to do. Zavada, his ability to hold the ball up and just as successfully as Chris Wood, admittedly a lower standard of play, but that's going to start like he holds the ball up, gives you time to get a couple other players forward. Ben Old goes gunning past him, lay it off, or picks the ball up in motion, and then he's away. Or Costa Barbarouses picks the ball up, running in behind kind of thing. That's how you can springboard into that stuff. And having Zavada back is going to help that a lot. They weren't that their trickiness against Newcastle Jets was that they were a team that they'd lost to before and have had a few struggles against in recent seasons, it feels like, and they didn't have Tim Payne. Other than that, they had everyone available. I think with the women as well, I know Canberra are not very good, bottom of the table now, that Adelaide won on the weekend, but Canberra is not bottom because they don't score goals. I think they even have the two top goal scorers, old Vesna, what's her name, and Michelle Heyman. They're not a good team because they concede a lot of goals. The defense is their problem. They're losing games 3-2, 4-3, and things like this. But they're a good attacking team. So that was a thing that the Phoenix had to cope with in a game where they didn't have Michaela Foster, they didn't have Mackenzie Barry, they didn't have obviously Marissa Vandermeer or even defensive-ish midfielder Grace Wisniewski. Well, Grace Wisniewski's box to box. She's a defensive midfielder and an attacking midfielder in one. But those two are out season-ending injuries. Barry and Foster weren't available. Their goalkeeper gets sent off with a quarter of the game still to go. Bring a couple of debutants off the bench. One of their centre-backs was starting her first game for the club, having been a mid-season signing. Like the amount of adversity they got to deal with at that point, and then to bring out one of their better defensive performances, that's huge. Like that's the kind of thing you build off. And I do think moving forward, like to fix that away form, that's probably where that probably is where the platform has to come from as well. That foundation is just being able to, you can't necessarily bank on clean sheets. We've seen the Phoenix Blues the last 2 weeks. They've conceded 2 goals. Both of them were a shot off target that hits another attacker and deflects into the goal. Like, what are you going to do about that? Those things can happen, but generally that's only going to happen once a game. Like you can sort of restrict a team to not scoring multiple times, then you're doing all right. And the Phoenix women, I think, are going to be better equipped to grind out some of those draws, turning those 2-1 defeats into 1-1 draws with a bit more of what we saw from them on the weekend, especially considering there are a couple of their best defenders to come back.
Beauty. We'll wrap it up there. That is the Niche Cast for this week. Stay tuned for the subscriber podcast coming at you on Thursday. Blackcaps test preview and a lot of football in the Flying Kiwis department. Big up yourself. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Church.